I'm Teisha Bader with the JBS News Update for Wednesday, October the 14th, 2015. The two victims of yesterday's terror attack in East Talpiot were laid to rest in Jerusalem today. 78-year-old Chaim Chaviv and 45-year-old Alon Govberg were murdered on a bus in the Jerusalem neighborhood when two terrorists from the neighboring Arab village of Jabal Mukaber boarded and began shooting and stabbing the passengers. The funeral for Chaviv was held this morning. Govberg was laid to rest this evening. In light of the surge of terror attacks over the last few weeks, IDF forces began sealing off violent Arab neighborhoods, including Jabal Mukaber today. One of the measures passed in an emergency security cabinet meeting held last night. IDF soldiers and police will also be stationed at many bus stops in Jerusalem for added protection and precaution. Israel's Interior Minister Silvan Shalom told Israel Radio Today that Israel will also revoke the residency status of 19 East Jerusalem residents over their involvement in recent terror. The White House condemned yesterday's deadly attacks in Jerusalem. Press Secretary Josh Earnest said the U.S. condemns, in the strongest possible terms, the recent terrorist attacks against Israeli civilians, which resulted in the murder of 3 Israelis and left numerous others wounded. Earnest said the U.S. also stressed the, quote, importance of condemning violence and combating incitement, and that the administration was very concerned about the escalation. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry reiterated that condemnation, urging both sides to take steps to restore calm. Speaking at Harvard University last night, Kerry also seemed to link the uptick in terror to settlement building.
And there's been a massive increase in settlements over the course of the last years. Now you have this violence because there's a frustration that is growing.
Kerry also said he'd be visiting Israel soon. European Union Ambassador to Israel Lars Faaborg Andersen condemned the terror attacks. He said they undermine the trust ordinary citizens feel for passers-by in the street, let alone the trust people need as communities if there is to be any prospect for peace. United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon expressed his concern that Israel was using excessive force to respond to the wave of terror. His spokesman Stefan Dujarric told reporters that the UN chief finds, quote, the apparent excessive use of force by Israeli security forces to be troubling, saying it demands serious review. B'nai B'rith International rejected the statement and noted Ban's lack of mentioning incitement on the part of Palestinian leadership. The organization said if this is the international response now, while Israeli civilians are maimed and slaughtered unprovoked on a daily basis, we can only imagine how predictably unjust it will be once Israel is again forced to more assertively engage in counterterrorism efforts, the way any other country would under such deplorable circumstances. The Simon Wiesenthal Center also condemned remarks made by the UN Relief and Works Agency, or UNRWA, who criticized Israel's, quote, use of excessive force in response to the terror wave. Founder and Dean and Associate Dean of the Center, Rabbis Marvin Heyer and Abraham Cooper, called UNRWA's remarks an outrage and said every nation in the world would respond powerfully to such a wave of terror. But only Israel is subject to criticism for the sin of defending her civilians. And this morning, a stabbing attack was prevented in Jerusalem. Initial reports say Israeli border police forces noticed a young Palestinian man sitting next to the Damascus Gate at the entrance to the Old City. He seemed nervous and raised their suspicions. When they began to approach him, he drew a knife and ran at them. The officers opened fire in the young man's direction, but he continued to run at them with the knife drawn and was then shot dead by the officers. The man is thought to have been a 20-year-old resident of Hebron. And looking now at some other news, here in the U.S., the Anti-Defamation League expressed its concern over an incident that took place this past Friday in Midtown Manhattan, when a man reportedly threw a glass bottle filled with an accelerant at 2 Israeli rabbinical students near the corner of West 37th Street and 9th Avenue. The device missed its target, and Yosef Rahimi and Yisrael Gadassi were unharmed. The The two are Israeli, in New York, studying for a year at a Brooklyn yeshiva. They were wearing traditional Orthodox dress at the time of the attack. And ADL New York Regional Director Evan Bernstein said the league was in close contact with the NYPD to try and determine if the attack was anti-Semitically motivated. And looking now at our programming for tonight, Wednesday, October the 14th, at 8 o'clock, one of America's leading Middle East experts, Dennis Ross of the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, discusses his view of the strengths and weaknesses of the Iran nuclear deal and the U.S.-Israeli relationship. At 9 o'clock, Mark Golub sits with former Israeli Ambassador Michael Oren on L'chaim. And at 10, the Wall Street Journal's Bret Stephens talks about his book, In Retreat, from the JCC in Greenwich. And coming up right after this newscast tonight, Thinking Out Loud with Micah Halpern. And that's the JBS News Update for Wednesday, October the 14th, 2015. I'm Teisha Bader.